Greetings and welcome to Bloomberg New Economy Conversations, where we talk to business leaders on the front lines as the global economy confronts the worst crisis since World War II, the coronavirus pandemic. My guest today is Herman Narula, the visionary co-founder and CEO of Improbable, a London-based gaming startup that enables developers to make extraordinary multiplayer games. Herman, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to see you.
So COVID-19 has been the ultimate test for a number of digital technologies. We've talked about some of them on this program, everything from 3D printing to telemedicine. If ever there was a moment for virtual reality, virtual worlds to shine, it's right now. I mean, we've been practically forced into digital worlds by social distancing. What has the industry as a whole taken away from this global lockdown?
So sometimes innovation and culture don't necessarily catch up with each other as fast as they could. And what tends to happen is that a new way of doing things, new technology or new tools, build up capability and pressure that people are still doing things the old way because, well, there's no reason to switch. And then a catastrophe or challenge occurs, which forces a great swathe of people to try something different, which has been enabled for a long time, but which is suddenly topical. And then that results in a behavior change. And I think the biggest thing that I see and that a lot of other folks are seeing across all of technology is this sudden shift where people who probably wouldn't have worked from home or conducted meetings through Zoom with customers and partners are now doing it and are loving it. People who perhaps wouldn't spend a lot of time in video games or virtual worlds are now doing it and loving it. And, and in turn, I think probably some people are changing consumer habits, like shopping online for groceries or for clothing, both things which you've either done or not done, particularly clothing shopping. And I think once you've started doing it and had positive experiences, again, it's very difficult to switch back. So I think we've seen this sort of culture shift happen overnight, and it'll have lasting implications in my view.
So we'll get on to some of those specifics in a minute, but first of all, how has this catastrophe affected your own business?
Oh, great question. I mean, we've been very fortunate in that we were able to react very early and very quickly. And being already a business based in China, the United States, multiple locations in Europe, we were already basically pseudo remote work in a lot of our processes. So we decided to shift completely to remote work, and probably we'll be in that position till the end of the year for most of our offices. And actually, surprisingly, being a company that's all about running things in the cloud, it's been pretty productive, in some ways more productive than when we were all in the office together, which is very, very interesting. I think it's been harder to onboard new staff. It hasn't really impacted demand for our products and services because being in gaming, there's actually been a huge uptick in demand, especially for our hosting and operating platform. We run a lot of games now for other companies, and they're finding that their demand for capacity has gone up, which has actually been very good for that business. I think long term, it could create challenges, especially for people who are investing in and building new creative products like games, if they don't have the ability to collaborate in person as part of the early stages of those processes. So I think it will hit long-term pipelines for content in my industry, but not right now.
Some people imagine a world lived almost entirely in virtual reality, from social life to commerce. Yet, if anything, this lockdown has shown how much we yearn for human contact. I mean, the people in Florida can't wait to get back to packed bars, regardless of the health impact, restaurants, sports stadiums, and so on. How do you see this balance between virtual worlds and, if you like, actual life?
So I think it's a common misconception that new modes of communication and access are necessarily destructive and replace the old. I don't see virtual worlds as replacing the real world. I see them as profoundly augmenting the real world. I think we're going to see people with second jobs inside games and virtual worlds, earning an income, supplementing the income that they currently have, meeting in and socializing with new people in new contexts. And we're already seeing this with game streamers and other forms of the first people working inside games and virtual worlds. But I don't think that'll stop people going outside or meeting new people outside. Actually, I could see the virtual world bleeding more into the real world, with the real world venues respecting or even providing outlets where people can engage in activities inspired by things happening in virtual worlds. We saw this with Pokemon Go, where a game essentially spilled out into the real world with people hunting and finding Pokemon, in meat space, so to speak.
So potentially a solution to this colossal unemployment problem that we have. What do people do for a living in virtual worlds?
So it's not a new concept. You know, as early as quite much older virtual worlds like Second Life, people have been able to earn an income making content, moderating inside virtual worlds, helping other people to play games better, even creating spaces for people to inhabit. It's just that now with the new technology, and in particular stuff that we and other companies are working on to increase the scale and scope of what is possible in a virtual world, and also the massive increase in demand, we're just going to see more and more professions exist that make virtual worlds more monetizable. So they either build content inside them or they increase the quality of experience people are having. There are already companies that are selling services of trainers who will teach you to play certain games better and meet up with you inside a virtual world. I could certainly see an economy where, you know, conservatively, you know, maybe 1-2% of people who play core games are earning some kind of supplementary income from that. And en masse, that's a lot of people, you know, engaged in a form of cross-border employment, which I think could have really positive ramifications for our economy.
Will 5G be the big enabler of your industry? And does it just enhance the quality and the richness of virtual experience, or does it actually enable new experiences altogether?
So connectivity is really important in reaching people and in giving people sort of ongoing high quality access to the more interesting high quality content. But the real bottleneck in our industry is it's just too expensive and too complicated to build rich multiplayer games. It's still something dominated by a handful of companies, and that in turn slows innovation because these games have 4-year, 5-year cycles. We're hoping to change that. A lot of what we provide vastly accelerates the development of these games, and there's a lot more work happening in the industry to do that. I think a combination of the cost of production going down and increased connectivity and more social and cultural comfort with playing games will lead to a sort of a pretty staggering renaissance in the next 5-6 years. Like, I look at the growth numbers of the industry and I think they're extremely conservative. You know, I could see this market being, you know, being in the hundreds of billions beyond where it is now, not very long from now, especially when we consider that games are, relative to other media, deeply under monetized. So on a per hour basis, some statistics would argue that reading monetizes better than gaming, which is clearly, you know, clearly something that will be addressed in the future.
In a TED talk several years ago, you famously argued that online gaming will be more transformational than artificial intelligence. Do you still believe that? And if so, where's the evidence?
More than ever. You know, and I think the simple evidence, the stat I would point to is, where are people spending their time? You know, AI will of course be transformative for society. So let me not underplay that. But transformative from the perspective of the human experience, yes, I think virtual worlds will probably have a more profound impact because it's going to change how we meet people, how we get educated, you know, how our militaries train. We're currently working with defense institutions in the UK and the US and some unprecedented visions for altering what armed forces readiness looks like using virtual worlds. You know, how we create a sense of community and cohesiveness, and much like social media transformed political conversations and social conversations, not necessarily for the better. I think virtual worlds will create a new shared language for people to have common experiences together. You know, just to sort of put a fine point on it, the only place right now where rich or poor, regardless of race or gender or even nationality, people are freely mixing with strangers constantly is in the matchmaking queues of online games. You know, people are making friends and you know, and falling in love with complete strangers who they're meeting through this process. You know, it's outside of national service. This is the best melting pot we've ever created.
So you talked about the work that you're doing with the defense industry. Let's go into that just a little bit deeper. I mean, COVID-19 has plunged us into a new world of radical uncertainty. The world has never seemed more fragile, more vulnerable, more impossibly complex. Is this an opportunity for you? I mean, one of the services you provide, Improbable provides is you offer businesses and governments a way to game out scenarios to help manage future shocks. What is the deeper application here?
This is very related to the direction of travel. So it might seem like very different things, you know, defense institutions, game development, etc. But it's at its heart is this idea that the more complex a virtual world becomes, the more representative of real world phenomenon that it can be. So building a simulation, for example, looking at something like disease spread in the context of a multi-model simulation at really large scale can be a very powerful tool. And I think what we are finding and what we are seeing is harnessing more and more compute, more and more scale, making it easier and cheaper to build these simulations. Seems to have applications everywhere. We focused on defense and gaming because they're both participatory simulations for training or for game playing, but we could easily expand this to other areas as well.
Last question, Herman. How far are we from a time when we really will have a virtual self, not just a cartoonish sort of avatar, that will become a meaningful part of our lives? Or put another way, when could our two digital selves be having this conversation?
So look, the red herring in the conversation in virtual worlds is absolute immersion. Sure, it would be incredible if we could plug into a virtual world that was seamless and like the real world. And that will come, and I wouldn't speculate on exactly when that will be. But I think an even more important question is, when do virtual worlds become a critical part of our lives? And I think that is the moment that you can earn an income inside a virtual world. And for that, I'd say it's less than 5 years away. There are so many things, from the stock market to running companies, to engaging with one another through through phone conversations and keeping up with social networks. They're all kind of virtual already. We don't need to be deeply immersed physically in those things for them to impact our lives. And I think we're just at that tipping point where the combination of how we earn an income and education will likely make virtual worlds a really important part of everyone's lives.
Herman Narula, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much.